moving quickly. Another handoff to Rankin. Rankin finds a hole. He's at the 30. Makes it to the 20. He's got one man to beat. Rankin walks into the end zone. Into the backfield. Braden Wright looks over top. He's going to try to find a man. He's got Alec Tatum. Tatum bobbles it, but he's in the end zone. What a connection between Braden Wright and Alec Tatum. Handoff to Rankin. Rankin right up the middle, and he's in the end zone for a Bearcat touchdown.
You that the views expressed in today's show do not reflect the views of KZLX, KNWT, or Northwest Missouri State University. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the show.
Into this week's edition of the Weekend Sports Kickoff here on X106 and streaming live on the KNWT Channel 8 Facebook page. Jacob Blair, Andrew Botwinick, Nolan Brooks, Austin McNorton. We're all back here again this week. I'm going to talk some Bearcat football to start off today's show. And for the second week in a row, the opponent coming to Bearcat Stadium, unfortunately, there's no way around it, isn't all that good this year.
No. Northwest 9-0 all-time versus Northeastern. Northeastern lost 86-7 last week to Mo Southern. That Northwest beat by 30. Northwest won 56-9. I'm sorry, Riverhawks, it's not looking very good for you at all. Ugly.
There's not a whole lot really to talk about. You go through the stats for the Riverhawks, and it's there's very the most impressive things. They got a good punter. Over 2,200 yards of punting this season.
That is impressive.
So, but there's not a lot that sticks out. For most of the statistics, they're either 10th, 11th, or 12th in the MIAA. On both sides of the football, they're bad on defense, giving up over 500 yards a game on the defensive side of the football. So, for Northwest this week, it's important to stay focused, go out there, and I think it's a week to, what's coming the next 2 weeks. It's a week to go out into a live football game, and yes, your opponent isn't necessarily, it's not a Fort Hays, it's not a UCM, which are the next 2 games, but it's still an opponent to go out there and clean some stuff up and make sure you win those last 2 football games, because regional rankings, the first regional rankings of the year came out Northwest right now in Super Region 3, just the 6th seed. So there's not a lot of room for them right now, and they have to be able to take this game that, barring a disaster, you see it as a win, and it's a place to learn. With an 0-8 Riverhawk team, you've got to learn and take what you can do in this game for those next 2 games for a push for the playoffs.
And you come into the game, and there's a lot of things. Yes, you're not playing a great team in Northeastern. There's a lot of different question marks that you have here if you're Northwest. The good news is that this is a chance. You have a second game where you're not having to potentially go into the fourth quarter with all of your starters in there. We saw a lot of different people rotating in the game against Lincoln. You have this game against Northeastern State. The outside of this, you play Fort Hays State the next week, and you end with UCM. This game is the game before your last 2 games get extremely difficult to play. You play Fort Hays State, Central Missouri. Those are the 2 games that everybody has had circled. Those are especially Central Missouri now with the way that the rest of the MIAA is shaken up. That is a game potentially for the conference. That is the conference game essentially. If Central Missouri doesn't lose another game and Northwest doesn't lose another game up until then. That's what it comes down to. This is a chance to revamp your offense, get everything clicking, make sure everything is moving on all cylinders. You're coming into this game, you're looking hot. You have Amani Donadell, who's been in the end zone 6 straight games now, I believe, is what that number is up to now. You have different players on offense that have been experienced. Your defense is looking phenomenal. All of those things have to come together if you're Northwest.
Yeah, and I think we're all kind of saying the same thing, essentially, is that this is a game, this is an opportunity for Northwest to try some things potentially and just really focus on saying, look, the way that we're ending the season is absolutely brutal. And we know with the regional rankings that have come out and everything, that everything is a must-win now with just how brutal the Central region is for football. And it's kind of the same for basketball, too. It's brutal. Jacob and I were talking about it last night about just how crazy the region is and if maybe there's a way to change how the seeding goes. Because if you're Northwest, you're saying, I mean, gosh, we're one of the best teams in the nation, but we may not even host a game for the playoffs at all. We may not even make the playoffs just because of how good our schedule is.
There's 28 teams. make the playoffs. Northwest being the number 14 team in the country right now, 6th seed in the region. So by math,
Right.
that means that technically they should be at best the 21st best team in the country. They're not. They're the 14th, and they right now you still have an opportunity with 3 weeks left to get a home playoff game, but you have to win out. But you look at the region rankings right now. Ferris State at 8-0, they're number 1. Central Missouri, and interesting with the way the region versus the national rankings kind of went here. Central Missouri, the 2nd seed right now at 8-0. Indianapolis, the 3rd. They're still undefeated at 7-0. Ouachita Baptist, 8-0 at 4. And then Harding is at 5 at 7-1. Northwest is 6 at 7-1. Then Grand Valley State is that final team at 7-1 in the playoffs. And the 3 teams on the outside right now, Missouri Western, 6-2. Fort Hays State, 6-2. And then Henderson State at 7-1. There's not you look at where it is right now, there is not room to lose a game. Because
Right.
you lose one to Fort Hays, they're going to jump you. You lose this UCM and Missouri Western wins out. Yeah, you beat Missouri Western, but they could jump you. There's a lot at play here. Plus, and I know some of these teams are still they're in the same conference. Some of the non-MIAA teams, they've still got to play each other as well. So on the other side of that, there's room to drop out. There's also room for Northwest still to move up if they win out. They could still get a home playoff game. These teams. Yeah, there's 4.
The problem is you don't necessarily control your own destiny.
You don't. You need help from some losses from some other teams, but these undefeated teams, they have some tough games coming up. Right. They're going to play each other. So I think we did it. If Northwest wins out, and with the teams playing each other, and someone has to lose a football game, Northwest can jump up to that 4 slot. That's about where we see the max being with 1 loss where they get to, but they can get to that 4 slot and get a home playoff game. It's just they have to win out to do it.
Do you think that there's any way that the committee for NCAA Division II would think about saying we need a seeding process rather than the way they're doing it with the regions? Or do you think that's something that's been this way for a while and they're not going to change it? It's too difficult to change. Money reasons probably being a significant factor.
You just said it right there. You can't have Division II teams traveling across the country every week.
Yeah.
That's why they have this the way they are, so you don't have to travel long distances until you get to the very end of the tournament. They do it with basketball. They do it with volleyball. Everything's region-based, so everyone kind of just goes to one spot. No one has to travel more than 8 or 10 hours maybe to do that. You don't – with Division II, I mean, it's an obvious situation where the revenue stream is not as high as Division I, so you don't want to be sending – full football teams on a couple flights or a charter flight across the country, 5 times during the course of a tournament.
And I think that's another thing you have to look at is that's how it's going to get so dicey is how close it is. And it's really unavoidable at this point, and that's why there's no wiggle room at all. And that almost makes it too difficult to try and seed these teams because you could put anyone at any spot minus the top 3, obviously, and that makes it so much more difficult.
Well, and we right now, Super Region 3, the only region where no 2-loss teams are currently seeded in the playoffs. All the other regions have at least one 2-loss team currently in, and then there's some that you've got several 2-loss teams still in the discussion where on the Region 3 side, there's 2 MIAA schools with 2 losses. And the only reason they're there is because they're MIAA schools and the conference is so tough. So the Super Region 3, it's the toughest region. It's been that way for a while, but like I said, there is no wiggle room for this team. And it gets into an interesting argument for this game this week as well. Because you look at last week against Lincoln, a blowout win for Northwest, but you look at what Missouri Southern did to this team. You get in a situation where do you have the mindset where maybe you need to go score 70 to make a little bit more of a statement? Do you think
that really has a factor in the deciding seeding is how much you beat a team by?
I don't think
it's close. It could.
That's the thing. True. We don't know for sure. With it being this close, do they look at a game and say, well, they only beat Northeastern 52-10? Or do they look at you and go, well,
which isn't bad.
No. Or do they look at it and go, okay, they won 70-0? That's kind of the JUCO mentality in terms of everything and how to get a good ranking. But with it being this close, it's possibly at the very bottom of the factor deciding factor. But if you're between two teams and you look at, okay, well, how did they beat similar opponents? It could play a factor with everything being this close.
Another thing, too, is if you're up 42-0 at halftime, Braden Wright and the rest of that starting offense is probably not going to play much in the second half. So on paper, if you finish that game 49-0, and yeah, the committee might say, okay, well, they didn't win by 70 points, but their starters were taken out at halftime.
And they get to rest for Fort Hays in Central Missouri.
And I think the committee might possibly take that in. I'm not sure if they would, but they might look at that and say, okay, well, they only scored 7 in the second half, but they put 42 up in the first half with all of their starters in.
I would hope that the score differential and blowout games don't matter. But the only reason I brought that up is because it's so close. It could. Mm-hmm. And that's the...
Right, because I'm all in favor of what Andrew just said of, oh, yeah, let's definitely rest our starters for these final 2 games of the season because we need them 100% healthy.
Well, especially with the MIAA, basically, I think week 1 is just a bye week, and they only play 11 games, and you don't have a bye week during the course of the season. It's 11 weeks straight, and then you go right to the playoffs. So
pretty brutal.
If you can get your starters out of the game, you should. In that Northeastern game, a 1:30 kickoff, we will have the call here on X106. Myself, Sam Steinmeier, and then Nolan Brooks will be on the call for that one. And then they will also be on the tailgate show starting at noon. Hopefully we have that up on X106. We've had some technical difficulties with that in the last couple episodes, but hopefully we've got that figured out this time. Also this weekend, start of basketball season. We had a lot of fun at the Basketball Bash on Wednesday. And
yes, we did.
That was worth our time. We
Yes,
were
we
we were
did.
worried we were gonna just be lost, but that was actually really fun. And I think they did a good job of adding elements into that to make it a little more enjoyable. So,
well, when you're giving play-by-play in color
on a kids
dunk contest,
That's pretty fantastic.
makes it better.
And honestly, outside of all of the events and stuff, just being able to bring players up from the team and get to know their actual personalities outside of win or a loss. How do you feel about this? How do you feel about X? We were in there asking them if we thought that they should be running the offense through Clarence,
Right.
if there was different things that Ben McCollum is doing here that they don't do at practice, or just different aspects to look at it, just to kind of get a laugh out of some of the players.
And to me, that event with all of the side themes going on, the somewhat 3-point contest, the little kids dunk contest, the dance competition, all the different things. It wasn't really a showcase of either team, but you know what was cool to see? The amount of fans that were there anyway. They're saying, this is both programs are really exciting. Obviously the men, but the women as well with what Austin Meyer has a lot of potential in doing here at Northwest.
Sports Kickoff here on X106, also streaming live on the KNWT Channel 8 Facebook page. Jacob Blair, Andrew Botwinick, Nolan Brooks, and Austin McNorton with you. And the Washington Nationals, everyone's consensus pick to win the World Series when we made our picks, are now World Series champions. No one won a home game, and the Nationals earn the crown. It was an interesting playoffs, but just a weird World Series. Just based on that one stat with the 7 road wins.
And what you could have made an argument for was Howie Kendrick getting MVP, and he would have been the second oldest player of all time to ever win MVP in a World Series, and he just kind of turned the clock back as a DH, getting up there in age. I think he's 36. The other guy, I don't remember his name, but he was 39 when he did it and won MVP. That was a legitimate argument coming into this game because Howie Kendrick, his at-bats were a little bit lower than everybody else on the team, but he was able to make the most of it. He hits home runs whenever he needed to. He went 2 of 3 in the Game 7, 2 RBIs. I believe it was the last couple of runs that they had there in the ninth inning as well.
It was just such an impressive performance all the way around by Washington. They shouldn't have. I mean, honestly, were lucky enough to even make it further in the playoffs. They were down by 2 runs in the ninth inning in the wild card game. Milwaukee should have won that game. They come back, they win. They get their way to the World Series, defeating the Dodgers and then the Cardinals and then who everyone was thinking and who I was thinking, honestly, this Astros team was one of the best teams on paper that we've seen in a while. I mean, we look at it and we say, we look at their starting pitching was the best in the league. We look at their bullpen, also best in the league. And we look at their hitters. You look at their entire lineup, any of them could hit a home run at any point. And so it's like, for the Nationals to do this all on the road in Houston, truly unbelievable. Truly, truly unbelievable.
I think something to pull out from this performance was if Houston was going to lose in one area and it was going to be a very big concern, it was the bullpen. And, man, you saw Washington's bullpen show up. I mean, their offense was there, yes. They were scoring runs, and they played great on the offensive side. But their
and no
bullpen,
way anyone would have guessed that.
Well, no, not at all. But the bullpen for Washington played phenomenal. Houston had a question mark for their bullpen where, can we preserve a lead? And they showed you a couple times they could
like
do
on
so.
On paper, they're the better bullpen, but
Exactly.
the Nationals stepped up.
But they just played great. They caught fire at the right time. That's usually how the playoffs goes. And when it's somebody who was not picked to win, the reason they win is because they played good baseball at the right time. And it just worked out for the Nationals.
That's been the World Series, though,
For the last couple of years,
last
yeah.
couple of years. It's the team that for 100 it's a 162 game season where it's baseball's not really throughout the season. Yeah, you can get a little bit momentum, but it's just kind of if you're good, you're going to win games. If you're not, you're going to lose games, and then you get to the postseason, and a lot of times that wild card win just sparks a team, and then they're off running and winning a World Series.
Well, I mean, even in the Nationals case, they're one of the few teams. They were 12 games below 500 at one point. They were 19-31, and they had an incredible second half. And you mentioned some teams just aren't able to pick up momentum. It usually doesn't happen, but for some reason it did for this Nationals team. And if you looked at this team's history, you said, no way.
Especially
no way.
this
they
season.
Proved everyone wrong.
I mean, you go back to the regular season, we were all the 100-win teams we were watching.
They took out the two best teams in the league by far.
You end up with a record of most 100-win teams. None of them won the World Series. None of them. It's the Nationals.
Yeah, and
who, if they were in the American League, would not have even made the playoffs.
Right. And I think that's just what makes it so impressive is that no one was really expecting this from them at all. They went out and proved everyone wrong by, of course, beating the Dodgers and then beating the Astros to top it all off. No one – I think you guys all picked the Dodgers, and I picked the Astros to win in this series by 5, and they lost in 7.
Part of it, too, is almost looking forward now. Don't you almost always have to pick a wild card team to make it at least to the World Series? It seems like every single year, one wild card team will make their way through the ALDS, the NLDS, the ALCS, the NLCS, all the way to that World Series and just absolutely catch, as we mentioned already, they catch fire when they need to. They play great baseball when they need to. They capitalize on everything that they need to. They make their way to the World Series, and they play on the biggest stage, and they perform well because they played well the past month or so in the playoffs.
And on the road, too. I think that's the other thing that just makes it so impressive is to say, they won the first 2 on the road, lost 3 straight. At that point, everyone was like, the Astros are going to win now. They're headed back home. And then the crazy call in Game 6, the Nationals prevailed in that one. And then in Game 7, an absolute pitcher's duel, like we expected, between Greinke and I'm blanking now. But
Strasburg.
On Game 7, incredible performance. But the Nationals still were able to prevail. Now, here's the question that everyone's kind of talking about after this World Series. Do you think that A.J. Hinch should have put in Garrett Cole when he took out Zach Greinke? That's kind of been the question, and that's been surfacing because Garrett Cole, kind of similar to what Mad Bum did to the Royals in 2014, was an absolute monster. The Nationals couldn't hit against him, and should A.J. Hinch have brought him in that situation when they pulled Greinke?
I already kind of told you this, my opinion on it at least, but I'll go ahead and just restate it. For players that want to go out and get that MVP at the end of it. It's not a lot often you'll see pitchers win that MVP unless they do a lot of things above and beyond just their
Like
normal
Strasburg.
just their stretch that they're in. They start, they get 5-6 innings, they're done for the game. That's typically not going to win you an MVP. But Strasburg, Bumgarner, they go above and beyond. They are almost impossible to hit in the playoffs.
Right.
If you're Garrett Cole and you're looking at a Game 7 and you're going to say, oh, if they ask me to go in, I'm going to go in. I don't know if it was something that they just didn't ask him potentially, or if they did ask him and he told him no. If you want to go in there and win for your team and you know you're the best pitcher on that team and they can't hit you, you go in there.
Right.
Welcome back to the Weekend Sports Kickoff here on X106 and streaming live on the KNWT Channel 8 Facebook page. Jacob Blair, Andrew Botwinick, Nolan Brooks, Austin McNorton with you as we head to hour number 2 of today's program. And it's the first week
Let's go.
of college basketball season. Said it might be the first and one of the best opening weeks we've had ever in college basketball. Number 1 will open up the season against number 2. Number 3 will open up the season against number 4. If you're not one of those two, if you like ACC basketball, well, they're going to start conference play to start their season. So it's a good and fun first week of basketball.
Jacob Blair loves college
Oh, yeah.
basketball, don't you? Because all the good teams play each other immediately. This
Right.
isn't college football.
You don't have to
so-
wait.
Hey, I love it. I look forward to this every year because you know that they've made it a tradition now to have number 1 play number 2.
Well, it's not
And-
that. It's Michigan State, Kentucky, Kansas, Duke, and they kind of move those teams
They
around.
just
and it's
always happen to be top 4.
They always happen to be top 10.
Yeah.
But this year, it's 1 and 2, Michigan State, Kentucky, and then 3 and 4, Kansas and Duke.
Yeah.
You can't ask for
A better opening,
on-court opening than that. And then you look around and you start ACC play this week too, because they expanded their conference schedule, so they had to find time to play those games. So like, you know what? Your first game of the year, Virginia, why don't you go play Syracuse in the Carrier Dome? Have fun with that.
Congrats on winning your national championship. Here's your reward. Like, that's brutal. And it's back. College basketball, I'm right there with you, Jacob. I'm excited. There's a lot of new storylines to follow in this season, and it's going to be great.
I might have to make an appearance on Tuesday Takeover.
Oh, we're
down.
I'm
next semester is going to be a lot of fun.
I'm self-inviting.
So,
myself.
okay.
That's what's happening.
I think I'll allow it.
Okay.
I think I'll allow it.
But with the start of college basketball season also means we got to start talking about games. As we mentioned, we're going to start with the classic to start the year. Number 1, Michigan State. Number 2, Kentucky. Be your Tuesday opener. Well, your opener is going to be Kansas Duke at 6, but we're going to talk about the 1-2 matchup first. Michigan State, Kentucky. If you aren't sure where your team sits, you'll know after 40 minutes of play on Tuesday.
Yeah, that's what makes this beautiful. I mean, the fact that Michigan State is now a considerable favorite to run the table this year, the fact that you're going to see them tested early should show you if Michigan State is as favorable as they have been. And this is the first time in school history that they're going to be ranked number 1 right out of the gate. So maybe that'll put a little pressure on them. Kentucky's used to the whole top 5 coming out of the season. They know how to do that. Michigan State does not, but Michigan State also brought back a lot of weapons and a lot of experience on this team, and that's what makes this team so scary. Honestly, I know KU Duke is going to be a good game, but if you want to tune into a game, it's got to be that one because these teams are all but even because they both have experience. They both have legitimate sophomores and juniors that are going to lead this team, and it's going to be a good game.
I think for Michigan State, obviously the biggest is with Cassius Winston. He's going to be, he's the Conference Player of the Year prediction. He's going to be a Wooden Watch Award finalist the whole season long. He's going to have Michigan State in the right place. There's other big factors. I think Xavier Tillman will be a big piece for Michigan State. But also, a lot of people forget Romeo Langford. He was supposed to be Michigan State's potential best player last season, or Joshua Langford, not Romeo Langford, Joshua Langford. But he's back this season now. He was out with injury. He's back this season. He's going to be a significant help for Michigan State. And this is going to be a tough matchup for him. But I think Cassius Winston is a huge advantage in these early games, saying, look, I've been in these games for the past 3 years. I'm ready. And I know he will be.
And I know Kentucky's returning a couple players, but Kentucky still has a lot of younger players and then some sophomores on that team we didn't see a lot of last year. That's where I think Michigan State has the edge in this first game. You're playing in Madison Square Garden. The lights are big. It's your first game of the season. And I know with the way high school basketball is now, you play some really big